Welcome to the Hire Yourself podcast. If you're ready to take control of your destiny, build wealth, and live life on your own terms, this is the place for you. Each week, Nat and I will talk about business, franchising, and personal growth to help make you more successful. Good morning, Nat.
Good morning. Hey,
how are you, my friend?
I am doing great. I got my headset all squared away, so I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I am a little bit, I'm relieved today. Relieved.
What happened?
I almost made a huge mistake. I almost made a $20,000 mistake the other day.
What? Well, you have to tell me more about
All right,
that.
So I've been reading about that. We're going to, here in Illinois, have some problems with the electrical grid where you may want to have a home generator. Right?
Yes.
Because my business and all this kind of stuff, I got to have power, and if they're shutting the power off for 10 minutes or an hour or whatever, that doesn't work for me, right? So I decide I'm going to get a generator. Okay. So I basically go look on the internet, I Google it, and I find a company, and I ask them to come out and to give me an estimate. So this young salesperson comes out, and he takes me, I show him where I want it, and he goes, "Oh, no problem. We'll put it there, and we'll put a little cement pad down, and that's where we'll put it." And so we kind of figure all that stuff out. We go sit at my kitchen table. He says, "This is what it's going to cost. It's $20,000, all that kind of stuff."
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, $20,000. All right. So I started thinking about this. That's a lot of money. And I was about ready to do it because it was going to be easy. They're a good company, all that kind of stuff. But I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe I should do a little bit more research. So I contact another company, right? And so I start doing a little bit more due diligence. Well, the other company comes in and says, Pete, where you want to put that, you can't do that. It's against code. And the city you live in has codes. And not only can you not put it there, you can't put it on either side of your house, and you can't put it in the front of the house. The only place you can put it, really the best we can tell, is in the middle of your backyard. And I thought, well, my wife's not going to let me do that. And I said, well, if I want it over here, he says, well, you can. It's still not right. But if we did that, because where you want it, it would cost you $40,000, right? Even if we could do it.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, if I would have just went with that first company, paid the $20,000, I would have had a generator put in that the city would have come in and said, that's against code, get it out of there. Right? I mean, and so that leads us into today. And I thought what we'd do is talk about the 8 top mistakes when people are investing in a franchise business, because that's a big investment. That's bigger than a $20,000 generator. Those are big investments. So I thought we'd talk about that today. Sound good?
That does sound good. I know it's when you're making those decisions, you're putting your whole life force, it's not just money, but it's also your time and your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So when you think about one of the top reasons that people make, or mistakes that they make when they invest in a franchise, what's one of the top ones you think of?
Well, kind of thinking, even your generator story, like not doing enough research, or, sometimes, a lot of times out here, guys, they'll go to Jimmy John's, and they're just like, I have to buy a Jimmy John's. And it's like, they don't even want to research anything else. So I would say just not doing the proper research.
Yeah. And one of the things that, you and I do with people that are executives that are looking to invest in a franchise is we teach them the franchise investigation procedures, the steps that you go through as part of your due diligence, right? The introduction call where you learn about the business model, to reviewing the FDD, to doing validation calls, to specifically going out to a confirmation day. So there's a series of steps that you go through. And if you don't go through those steps, you have a chance of not doing enough research or not getting the information you need to make an informed decision.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that franchising is, when you buy a franchise, it's very much systems and processes. It always made sense to me that in the franchise investigation or research process, it was a formal, kind of like a process that you could actually follow, so you could cross the T's and dot the I's and get the research done.
Yeah, certainly. What's another reason, a second reason you think, a big mistake that people make when they
I
invest in
think
a franchise?
being under capitalized. I saw that a lot in my Comfort Keepers days. I told you like how I bought my first franchise when I was in my 20s. That's probably a little bit naive about the investment. It's like you write the check for the franchise fee and you think that's about it. But then it does take more working capital, and then it always takes a little bit longer than you think to get to break even, and a little bit longer to get to profitability. So I think being properly capitalized or is really important. So I guess opposite of that is not being properly capitalized when you're starting your business, or maybe being overly optimistic about how much time it's going to take to get to profitability.
I'll extend that a little further, because I look at it is that when we're investing in a business, if you have a certain net worth, you don't want to take too much of your overall net worth
Yeah.
and put into a business, right? You don't want to overextend, meaning if you have a net worth of $1 million and the total investment for the franchise is $1 million, you're putting too much of your overall worth towards that business. And so I think that's a big mistake when people look to invest in franchises, over leveraging the investment.
Yeah, I think that's good. There's always those rules of thumb, like how much of your income you spend on mortgage or different things like that, or food. It's probably the same for like when you're investing or starting a business. You want to kind of keep within those rules of thumb. They're there for a reason. They're tried and true. They're tried and true over many years. So
yeah, absolutely. And what's another or a third reason somebody mistake that they can make when they're investing in a franchise?
Just thinking back when I bought my senior care franchise, I remember I was I had in my head like, I'm going to call and talk to as many franchise owners as I can. And so I literally, just it was back. There wasn't so much the internet back then. It was more like, here's here's names and phone numbers, and you'd call them and you'd actually talk to people. It's kind of like that shoe leather, boots on the ground, like talking to existing franchise owners, seeing what they like, what they don't like, kind of what we call the validation calls. I think if somebody kind of craps out or wimps out on making those validation calls, I think they're leaving a lot of stones unturned. I think that's a super valuable area to just, because if you could establish a little rapport with those franchise owners, and kind of ask them some questions, you'll hear some unscripted answers, which is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think validation, as we've talked about, is the most important part of the whole process. That's really where the rubber meets the road. That's where you find out franchises are happy and more importantly, making money. And validation is your opportunity to talk to those franchisees without the franchisor present. And you need to take advantage of that. Yeah. And if you've got major concerns, I always tell people, if you've got major concerns, like I'm thinking about going into boutique fitness, well, ask that franchise owner, how did you get past looking at investing in boutique fitness? There seems to be a lot of concepts out there. So you can kind of get in and dig deep with these validation calls.
Yeah. What would be your thought process, like if it was a newer system and didn't have that many franchise owners up and running? What's kind of your thought process on how to validate that?
Yeah, it's harder. And so if they have other franchise concepts under their portfolio, then I may validate with them to get a feel of how the business partner, the franchisor, does in supporting them.
Kind of see what their track record is.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Just, I want to get a feel for that. And I also, if there is an operating unit, I want to talk to the person that's running it. So I gotta do that. We see so much now today. Validation is done in two primary ways. The one way is a lot of them are doing group calls, and group calls are really efficient. I mean, the franchisee only has to do one call instead of 15 calls. And it's efficient for you because you get to ask your questions, but you get the benefit of listening to other people's questions. So these are very efficient. But the other way is my favorite way, and those are one-on-one validation calls. And that's where you can call anyone in as many as you want. And that's really where you can kind of go a little bit deeper, a little bit more intimate with your questions.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about franchising is that every franchise files an FDD, or their franchise disclosure agreement, each year. And that's public domain or public information. And they, believe it or not, have the list of, franchise owners, past and present, in there, and you can call and talk to them. I think a lot of people, probably even another mistake some people make, is not taking the time to review the FDD. They're probably like, oh my God, it's 200 pages, 10-point font or whatever. But there's a lot of gold in those franchise agreements, and it's all in there for, your own protection and information.
Yeah, well, the franchise disclosure document is a mandated document, right? All franchises have to have it. It's a set format of 23 sections or items is the term they use. And it's really where you get a chance to understand the experienced leadership team, the history of the franchise system, the investment range, a list of all the franchisees, the item 19, where you have the opportunity to see high-level financial performance numbers. So this is really important. And what a lot of people don't realize is the actual franchise agreement you're going to sign is in that FDD.
Yeah.
And people don't take the time to read it. And I always tell people that if you're going through the process, if you're looking at multiple franchise concepts, that maybe you skim them. You look at high, sections like 6, 7, 19. But when you narrow your focus down to one or two franchise concepts, you have to read them in their entirety. I mean, that's your role from that standpoint.
Well, they're mandated to write those in plain English. So, most people that we work with should be able to understand like 99% of it for sure.
Well, you read through it, and if you don't understand, you go back to the franchise development person and ask the questions, right? And if you still don't understand it, reading through it, and the franchise development person, well, then you hire a franchise attorney. From the standpoint, and the franchise attorney is good because they know that you can't redline or change a franchise agreement in most cases. All they can do is tell you some things to be concerned about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get a mortgage for your house. You're sitting there at the closing. It's like, oh, nobody, don't really go through and redline it and be like, I need to change this paragraph. You know what I mean? That'd be funny. I wonder how the mortgage, the bank would respond if you tried to do that.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't go real well. But anyways, all right. What's another common mistake people make when they're looking to invest in a franchise?
I see that, people don't want to really follow a system. So like I've kind of grouped people that want to have their own business kind of in two categories. One that is they're kind of creative, entrepreneurial. They want to like do everything. They want to create the logo, create the brochure. They want to decide what products are in the store, like all that. So they're like super creative and kind of trailblazers. And then the other category are people that are a little bit more like probably process driven, or maybe a little bit more conservative or reserved as far as just going and doing something new. So they love like a franchise because you have all the systems and process in place. So I think one thing I try to catch early on with the people that I'm working with is trying to figure out if they're a good fit for franchising, kind of conceptually. Like, are you the kind of guy that's going to embrace, like, this is how we do it, and don't worry about making new logos or new brochures or bringing new products to the store. You just execute the system. So I think that's one thing that's pretty important.
Yeah, I think you can have your creativity and you can be a system follower. I think you can have both, and that's a good quality. So what I always tell people is that you invest in a franchise for the systems of process and procedure and support. So you invest in that, so you should follow the system from some point. And really smart people sometimes don't do that. I had one guy that invested in a window washing franchise, right? And he started out, and he had run divisions of companies, right? He started out, and he was terrible. He did rotten, and he just was struggling. And the franchise company called him and said, "What's going on?" And he goes, "Hey, listen, I know business. I've run divisions of companies." And they say, "We know you know that kind of stuff, but just follow the system. You'll be successful." The guy starts following the system, and he's in the top third of the franchise system. So at a minimum, we follow a system, but you can always make the system better. You can pull upon that creativity. So, whether it's finding something you do a little extra for the customer, or a unique way to greet people, whatever it may be. Bottom line is you can make it better, use that creativity, but at a minimum, you got to follow the system you invested in.
Totally. Yeah, like a lot of times franchising will have very specific like computer or tech requirements or guidelines, and you don't want to spend your time reinventing the wheel if they've already have something that works well for the whole system.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when we talk about franchising and people investing in franchises, what's another common mistake people make?
I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but just kind of, maybe being a little bit blue sky or overly optimistic about how much it's going to cost, your initial investment, or how long it's going to take to get to break even, or how long it's going to get to profitability. So just kind of being like underestimating startup cost, I think can be a landmine for people. Which kind of goes back, we were talking about making sure that you're properly capitalized. Like, you just want to make sure that you have the numbers dialed in before you take this journey.
Yeah. Well, we talked about earlier about the FDD, and in the FDD, there's an item 7, and that's where the franchisors lay out kind of the investment range to get into a franchise. And so as you're doing your due diligence, you're trying to validate some of those numbers. So, for example, if it says the cost to build out ranges from 125,000 to 175,000, you want to, as part of your validation, talk to franchise owners to understand really what they paid to build out the facility, right?
Totally.
Or the marketing and stuff like that. So the idea is that we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what it's going to cost to get this business, everything it's going to take to get the business up and going, right? So that total investment. And that takes some extra work, and you got to really spend some time validating those expenses, because that's important. If it's off 20%, that's significant. If it's a $400,000 investment and it's off by 20%, well, now you're at $480,000, nearing $500,000 in terms of a total investment.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like franchising because, with over 4,000 concepts out there, I feel like there's a franchise for everybody. Probably actually something we hadn't really talked about was making sure that you define success, like what success is for you, because for some people, they just want to have, maybe something that's kind of more owner operator. Maybe they're, the one doing the work or meeting with customers or clients, and other people might be like, I want to open up, one retail, XYZ, whatever that is. And, I was talking to one guy, and they had bought 3 territories for a retail concept, and they were opening up all 3 simultaneously. And so I think that's, it's kind of cool. It depends on what your appetite is, and success can definitely be different things to different people, just based on what your goals are.
Well, yeah, and I think back to your point of, you make sure you find a franchise concept that it matches what you're looking to do in terms of engagement.
Exactly.
Right? So you don't want to invest in a franchise where, if your expectation is that you're going to be involved in a semi-absentee, part-time, managing the manager, watching over your business, right, and all of a sudden you're involved in the business full-time, that may not be good, right? So it's having a realistic expectation of what your engagement would be, and then also understanding, will that business model allow you to do that?
Yes. And then it goes back to the validation that, making validation calls. Can you validate other people have done that, blaze that path before you? And it all kind of starts to kind of come together, as far as, you can stack the odds in your favor if you follow the process of research.
Yeah, agreed. And when we talk about expectations, that's probably another mistake people make, because they have the expectation that I'm going to replace my corporate income immediately.
Yes.
Right. They just have this expectation that it just happens, and it just takes a certain amount of time and scale. But if you look to think you're going to replace your corporate level income $200,000-$300,000 in 4 months, it doesn't happen.
Right. Well, and there's a different kind of a rhythm to having your own business too. Like with corporate, a lot of guys are like, they're just trying to do their best, and then when they hit retirement age, they're going to retire. But when you have your own business, you can also, if you set it up right, you could kind of have it till the day you die, for a lot of times, because you can have it so it's not, consuming every minute of your day, and not heavy travel. Franchise is pretty much always going to be hyper local, so it's going to be very, not a lot of flying on planes all over the globe type thing, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, and that's maybe another podcast we do. We talk about how you fund retirement, right? And
yeah,
I believe today you can't save enough money. It's really hard to save enough money based on inflation and how long people are living. And so a franchise is a great mechanism that kind of takes you into retirement, gives you that income where you're not having to eat into your assets. But I think that's another podcast. So,
all right. We'll tee that up for next time.
All right, fair enough. So, bottom line is that when you're looking at investing in a franchise, you want to make sure that you're very diligent in the process of evaluating franchises so that you don't make a mistake. And the best thing you can do is have a franchise consultant help you, be there by your side, coaching you through so that you're going through the steps, you're doing all the things that you need to do so that you don't make a mistake investing in the wrong business.
I totally agree. That's kind of that concept of you don't know what you don't know, right? So, it's good to get as much help as you possibly can so that you can know the questions to ask. That's will help you make a good decision.
All right. Well, I'm off. I got to go figure out a way. If I can't have a generator, I'm going to go get solar panels. And
get you a windmill.
My neighbors would like that a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Hire Yourself podcast. For more resources, check out our website at hireyourself.com. And remember to subscribe to this podcast to receive each episode. Please leave us a rating, and we'd love to hear your feedback or suggestions for topics.